had this vision, and it was like a giant redwood or sequoia, and it had fallen across a path, but written on the side it said, America Fallen. And honestly, I could never imagine in my mind, I'd ever see such a thing happening, and yet we're actually living in the time where I believe that vision is coming to pass. And so, here's what was interesting, is the tree fell across the path. The path was the road that most believers were on. When they came up to the fallen tree that had covered the path, they couldn't go under, they couldn't go to the left or to the right, and they couldn't go over. And most of them stopped because they couldn't get past the fact that America had fallen. But in the midst of the tree, there was like this translucent door, a cross, that some were able to pass through. And as they passed through, they became giants on the other side wearing crowns. And what I've come to understand is that those who were able to overcome, the fact that America had fallen, and overcome by the grace of God, being able to find life when all their life has been stolen, whatever life that they would have had as normality or in this country, but they found life in Christ regardless of the loss of our country. They literally became giants with crowns on the other side. And I think that's the key, to the temptations that are coming, is that we really need to find God greater than whatever was coming upon us. Well, I had a vision about, and this was more recently, about the dollar's collapse, and that the dollar's value went from, you basically got $1 for every $10. That there probably was this is me now speculating what that meant, it was a currency exchange, but at least a devaluation. I believe we're going to get a new currency. What I saw in the vision was the dollar being devalued 1/10 of what it is today. I feel like God's been telling me that we're going to be destroyed first in our financial. And that is presently what's unraveling right now, is that we are being destroyed financially. And what is amazing to me is that it's blind people driving the car at 100 miles an hour into a wall. I mean, they cannot hear the warnings. They're blind to where we're heading, but we're heading to our own destruction financially and quickly. There is a delusion. There's something that has a drunkenness, whatever has overcome them, that has made them blind to the things that would seem to be so obvious to us. So I was praying one time and felt like the Father just quickened to my heart. He said, "This is how the church in America was formed." And what I saw was a huge mountain range. And the rains fell upon the mountain range, and like water, when it goes down, it collects. And going down a mountain, it goes, will start in streams and rivers on the way down. On a desert floor, it created this vast lake that if you were to stand on the edge of the shore, it was greater than you could see from one side to the other. It was vast. But then the sun had come up, and as the sun started to heat up the water, it all evaporated, except for a few small pools. And what he had quickened to my heart is the church in America started by the path of least resistance. That's what water does when it comes down the mountain. It finds the path of least resistance, it collects itself there, and as it went down to the desert floor, though it looked like it was vast and it was huge, all it took was a little bit of heat for it to evaporate, and there was just a few pools left. And unfortunately, a lot of our doctrines and a lot of the way the modern church is done, it's the path of least resistance. In fact, we've really lost the message of the Gospels, which is the centrality of the person of Jesus himself. Pillars in the church, and at first I had to stop, show me pillars, and the Roman columns, and each one started falling one after another. And I said, "Father, what is this?" And he quickened to my heart. He said, "These are leaders within the church that you're going to see fall." And one after another, then over the years, which would have been considered as pillars, fell just as the vision was shown me. And during that time, he was also showing me things that were going to come to America. Again, it hit at the time, unbelief because of maybe my love for the country or idolatry for the country or just unbelief that something like this, no paradigm to appreciate what he was trying to show me. But one of the first visions he showed me was a nuclear missile coming towards America, And on the side of the missile had a red star. And I kind of recognized what that is now, is the emblem that was on there was the North Korean flag. And then the missile would then turn to a sword and then turn back to the missile again. And I'm, Father, what is this? And what I felt he was saying to me was sword of judgment. Again, my mind not being able to catch up or get my mind around what that actually meant. I'm just relating to you the vision and the words that I heard. But what was interesting was it being a North Korean flag, is that I think now, being that they're making intercontinental ballistic missiles now, that it was a timing. I'm looking at this in retrospect. This was back, and I remember this was back in 1985 when I had that vision. And now, is just in the last 6 months, is when they have the capacity to do what that vision showed me. So I take it now, looking back, as he was showing me the timing of when these things would happen. And I believe we're into that time of when the other visions that he had showed me are coming to pass. He showed me so many visions that about 95% of them have already come to pass. But the last 5 were the worst 5. The last 5% was the worst that was yet to come. Again, during that same time, when he showed me a vision of this missile, I was looking down at a map of America. And it was as if I saw 12 nuclear explosions go off at the same time across the map. And cities I've been to, cities I recognized, but it didn't seem like it was ballistic in the sense it was a missile, but they were nuclear. And again, my mind could not get around that, because at the time my mind couldn't conceive that a nuclear weapon could be delivered some other way other than a missile. And apparently technology, when I had that vision, and between then and now, the technology is that we don't need a delivery system by a missile. And so here it is, I was seeing these cities blown up, not by a missile, but it was nuclear explosions. Again, the period and the time that we live in is the time when that is capable of happening. Back in the 90s, I lived in Atlanta. It's one of those dreams, it's a God dream, and you wake up in a sweat, and you're going, I have to pray. And the dream was that I was walking out of Atlanta, and I was heading north out of Atlanta, and Atlanta was on fire behind me, and everyone else that could walk would walk. There was no vehicles that were running. And during the time, I was praying about, God, do you want me to leave Atlanta? I'm asking for a confirmation. I'm testing the Spirit. God, show me what you want me to do. And this was the dream he gave me. And again, now the sense of urgency is reinforced within my heart. And so now I'm intensely praying, God, would you show me what to do? Confirm this is you. I had half a dozen people who didn't know each other call me within the next couple of days, and they said, Doug, I had this vision, or I had this dream. And what they said was, Atlanta has basically 4 or 5 different highways that lead out of the city. Okay. So one person would call and say, Doug, I had this vision that I was walking out of Atlanta on I-20 heading west, and the city was on fire. Another person called me. Again, none of these people knew each other. Someone would call me and said, I'm heading out I-20 east, and the city's on fire. 75 north, 85 north, the city's on fire. 75 south, 85 south, the city's on fire. And they all had the exact same dream, same vision I had within days. This was interesting because I felt it was an intercession when I got it, but I also felt that there was 2 meanings to that. I woke up, and I woke up to screaming, and which is interesting because in the recent shooting in Sandy Hook, a couple days before the shooting, all I could hear was a mother's voice screaming when I woke up, and I, Father, what is this? And I felt that was an intercession or something about to happen. But this was similar, that right before the earthquake in Haiti, I woke up to screaming, and it was as if I was hearing a million voices screaming. And I'm crying. I said, Father, what is this? And what immediately got quickened to my heart, sometimes God's answering you before you even get the words out of your mouth. I don't know if you ever had that experience. And I heard in my mind, it's the nanosecond between someone alive and someone facing death in eternity, not knowing exactly where they're going. The incredible sense of horror that in the process of death, where it's unstoppable, and the terror of where I'm going to go. That's what I was hearing, was a million voices screaming, which just, I hit the floor, and my own sense of horror and tears, and cried, and God, how many can be spared? Spare them. And shortly after that, the earthquake in Haiti, I think there was 200 and some thousand people that died in that earthquake. And I can even remember right where I was when the earthquake happened. I was in my office. I was walking out to the front door. At the moment it happened, I almost fainted. I turned to my secretary and I said, something bad has just happened. And that's when I found out about that earthquake. But when I had that thing happen to me, I also felt like the Lord saying, it's also something that's going to happen in America. Another vision I had was what happens when the financial collapse. And I saw beautiful women that would probably have never given a consideration to anyone else around them, that they knew that they were beautiful and that they were wealthy. And yet they were selling their body, begging just to have food. They would do anything just to have food. And it was a time where the context of time was, it was that we were at the effect of a tremendous betrayals. And I think that in fact is going on. And another one about the same time was this explosion in the natural. Now, I don't know if it's the nuclear that we're talking about, but it was an explosion in the natural that was so large that it literally took the breath of men away in the shock that happened. But immediately after that was a second explosion. And the second explosion was that of the Holy Spirit, which also took the breath of men away, but the second explosion was far greater than the first. And that when men got their breath back, they immediately ran to take hold of Jesus. That we had a government that would purposely set up our country or peoples or groups within this country for takeover and for betrayal. And at the time that we're heading into is that I think when the mass of people in our country realize how much they have been lied to, it would already be too late to do anything about the lies. And then with the financial collapse, I do a lot of business online. In fact, one of the companies I have is just completely an internet company. And I saw, and I had to say this for myself, I saw I'd be out of business in one day, that the internet commerce would collapse in one day with the economy. And what people are prone to do is anything that they can imagine, the skin for skin, that to do anything to save their own life. And in that is where horrors, I think, are going to come on the country to which are unimaginable because of what your neighbor will do to survive and family will do against family member just to survive. We're already seeing the start of that. But at the same time, I have to say, we're also seeing, I find it easier to talk to those that are lost, who know that something is up, know that they're at an end, and they're asking to want to know God, than it is those who profess to know God that are in denial of the day that we're living in. I'm seeing it easier, God's Spirit moving upon those who do not profess God, that they want to know God, while at the same time those who profess it, many of them seem to be oblivious to what's going on around us. That I had a dream, and the dream was, I have a son and I have a daughter, and I saw in the dream that my wife and I've had a vision for most of my marriage of seeing myself standing next to my wife and the Lord returning in the air. And that has kept us through so many different things over the years, thick and thin. I've held on to that, and it has reinforced over and over again the sense of the day that we live in. But this dream was interesting in that I saw my wife and my daughter and myself. We were raptured, but my son was left behind. And I woke up out of the dream, and that kind of startled me. Now, I'm not giving a critique, of the rapture. I'm relating to you the dream, and there's a point in just a second. So I have this dream that we're raptured. My wife, my daughter, and myself are raptured, but my son was left behind. And this was at 3 o'clock in the morning. I get up. I'm moved like I wouldn't want to see my son left behind, so I want to pray for my son. Now my son professes the Lord. And I went into the other room, and he just happened to be awake at 3 in the morning. And I said, and his name's Jeremiah, I said, Jeremiah, I got to relate to you this dream I just had. I don't know that it necessarily fits my theology, but I want to relate to you the dream. And the reason why is I found that dreams and visions, those things are great and provoking in me what doesn't know God by faith. You know, it shows me areas where I lack a knowledge of who he is. So they're tremendous prayer fodder. But anyway, I was sharing with my son because of concern. I said, son, here's the dream. We were raptured, but you were left behind. I don't know how to, get my mind around that. And he looked at me and says, Dad, I felt like God's been asking me, would I be willing to stay behind? Because there's a ministry that I'd have in staying behind. As a father, couldn't imagine a greater blessing that my own son could count the cost of his own life, but seeing a higher purpose for the kingdom and being able to minister those left behind.